'Twas the Fight Before Christmas is a brand new documentary on Apple TV Plus that tells the story of one North Idaho neighborhood that gets thrown into chaos over one man's obsession in bringing Christmas cheer to all. Jeremy Morris is a Christmas-loving lawyer who wants to host the biggest Christmas event in America, but his plans hit a snag when the homeowners association of his neighborhood tell him that he cannot do it. A contentious fight begins and things begin to spiral completely out of control, which is the story this documentary tells, and we got a chance to speak to its director, Becky Read. Check it out.
I am the only American, probably the only person in the world, who has been banned by a federal court from decorating for Christmas.
Becky, it's an absolute pleasure. First of all, congratulations on the documentary. It was a beautifully aggravating experience, and I loved every minute of it. But before we get into it, just very quickly, why was this a story you felt like you needed to tell?
I think it was an intriguing, kind of interesting way of looking at a conversation that everybody is having across the globe in regards to division and our personal liberties and infringement upon those, and how we tolerate each other, but wrapped up into a fun Christmas bundle. So, it's very serious to the people that have lived through it, but there's also an element of, we wanted this doc to be an entertaining way to explore those more serious themes and issues. So it ticks a lot of boxes really on being a refreshing thing to think about, and the themes are really serious, but ultimately, it's a Christmas story and everybody loves to watch those. So you can get people to watch your more serious film by stealth, but they think they're going to watch something really entertaining and light.
But Jeremy comes across as a very willing subject. Am I right? Was it difficult to get him to participate?
No, I mean, you're right. Jeremy is very willing. He's very media savvy. Prior to our getting in touch with him, had publicized his story and his case. One of the things I was interested in the story was that, there was such a lack of any other version or any other side from any of the neighborhood. And I really wondered, what's their version of this? Why is there only one side of this? Why aren't they speaking? Why aren't they talking? So it became really something even more kind of a challenge to sort of try and think there's definitely a story here to tell, that goes beyond Jeremy's version of it.
So tell me this, you've obviously made a conscious choice to keep your own authorial voice out of the documentary. But I'm curious to know your take on Jeremy. Do you believe his motives? Is he the hero of his own story? Because on the face of it, cheering people up with lights, with cotton candy, hot chocolate, raising money for kids with cancer, just feels like something to be celebrated.
It's true. I mean, it's really tricky. I spent a lot of time with Jeremy off camera, and I think part of the reason I wanted the film to be so balanced and not have my kind of thoughts too much or perspective on it, is that there are different versions of this event and they can all exist at the same time. You don't have to take a side. And I really wanted the different versions of these events and the subjective realities to come through in the film. And I want people to question their own ideas throughout the film about what is right and wrong. And I do think that changes as the film plays out. So I went on a journey all the time of like, I don't know if I believe this, who's right, who's wrong. And, had lots of conversations with Jeremy about that, on and off camera. So, I think, everybody has their own perspective, and that can also change on each day. Some days I thought, I really understand why you feel, I genuinely do understand why Jeremy and Christy feel very upset and hurt, and that Jeremy has really good intentions about things, and the way he handles things is often not necessarily the way I would, for example. But, I also understood how the neighbours felt. And I think, if you're making a film that ultimately at its heart is about tolerance, I really did want to kind of truthfully and fairly, as to the best of my ability, explain how it felt to be all the different people in this neighborhood.
No, and you're absolutely right, because I think your documentary speaks to a perennial problem with our public discourse at the moment, and not just in the United States, but even here and across the world, in that there seems to be less listening and more just the stating of one's position, for better or for worse. And watching your film, it felt like, oh wow, everyone just kind of set out to state their position, and I was like, this is escalating very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it does. And I think your sympathies can shift we kind of unpack the absurdity of how far it all went, the amount of time, the amount of money, the energy that was spent, and the psychological toll that it takes on everybody. But also one of the things I found really interesting was the kind of what happens when people think in absolutes, and Jeremy really does have a good versus evil declaration of everything, it seems, and I tried really hard to speak to him about the grey area that exists, and he's very black and white, and I've never met anybody who was so stridently determined that they are right, and there's no other version of this that can be possibly be true or right either. And that was really fascinating, hard to grapple with, obviously, but when you're so convinced that you're right, it becomes very hard to see the other side. The mentality becomes, if you don't agree with me, then you're against me, and I think that's really dangerous. So it was definitely something that we wanted to get across in the film, that these kind of warring sides became very tribal, and how do we unpick that and bring things back. It's a tricky, complicated event.
It is indeed, but it also feels, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like this escalation, and the way the story has played out is almost a consequence of the Trump era. Am I right in thinking that? And this just could be rose-tinted glasses, but it feels like it may have played out differently 10 years ago.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think there's been a huge shift in society. If you look back 10 years ago, there was no, don't quote me on when the internet started, but I do think lots of things have changed in society. Certainly, the Trump era has definitely had an impact. We wanted to try and stay away too much from that, because I think it's a turn-off for people, and I wanted to be able to explore this very human story that's quite universal within the context of where we are today, without necessarily explicitly landing on that hot spot subject.
Right.
But I think the way that we talk to each other online, the way that people are very quick to defend or attack Jeremy or the neighbours either side on Facebook or Twitter, and that to me is also something that has happened in society, where we have stopped being able to talk to each other, and becoming even more geographically divided by our political leanings as well. People moved to Idaho for its politics. Jeremy moved to Idaho because he wanted to be surrounded by people that agree with him, and was very surprised that he didn't in this circumstance. So I think it's happening all over in lots of different ways, and I loved the way that the film kind of encapsulated that within one tiny neighborhood.
You capture all these various moments and key moments, but I was really curious, what happens in between? Does everyone just quietly live happily together?
I think it's very difficult to live there, and I think that was one of the things I really struggled with is, there's tension in the neighborhood. Most people are trying to just get on with their day-to-day life. I don't think it's nice necessarily for anyone. There's an active decision to try and ignore what's happening down the road, or the person that you don't talk to. And that's one of the things that I really felt drawn to about the whole story, was what's it like to live in a neighborhood where your home is your sanctuary, where this tension is still going on all the time. And I think it's very difficult. And I think I felt for everybody equally in that way. Sometimes Jeremy makes things harder for himself and Christy, I think, but that is his way. People disagree or agree with that. But yes, it is, it's normal for the most part that people are getting on with their lives, but I don't think it's ideal.
Right. Well, I think I'm out of time, but Becky, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And
you too.
Congratulations on the movie. There was that one moment in the beginning, and I just have to say this, when he's shopping for Christmas trees and he goes, "Oh, if you love me, you'll let me buy it." And at that point in the film, you're like, "Oh, isn't that cute?" But then as you reach the end of the film, you're like, "Oh, that's so manipulative." That was a fantastic choice, and I lost it when the old lady lost her dog. I was just like, God damn it, man, let her have her dog. But yes, thank you.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
I did very much. Thank you.
Oh, you didn't get a permit. This is a miracle. You don't get permits for miracles.
That was Becky Read, the director of Twas the Fight Before Christmas. You can watch it on Apple TV+. Let us know what you think of the movie when you do. Sound off in the comments below. Don't forget to check out all of our other videos on YouTube. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family. You know what to do.